started to realize was that I wasn't very careful with what I said, and that seemed in some way to be related to that. It's not surprising because, you know, it's not really obvious that the Nazis, for example, were all that careful about what they said in terms of its relationship to the truth. Quite the contrary, and the same with the ideologues in the Soviet Union. And so the idea that there was some relationship between carelessness in speech, lies and deception and that sort of thing, or self-aggrandizement, or any of the things that you can indulge in if you're careless with your speech, and the weakening of your character to the point where you might get tangled up in great and terrible sociological movements. That seemed to me to be reasonable. And many people had commented on that, like Solzhenitsyn, for example. And so I started to experience discomfort with what I was saying. And what seemed to happen was that I started to realize and could feel it. I was reading Carl Rogers at the same time, and he actually suggested that psychotherapists pay attention to exactly this sort of thing. I started to understand that many of the things I was saying weren't true. I didn't really believe them. They weren't really my thoughts. They made me feel weak when I said them.
Can you give an example?
That's a good question. Can I give you an example? Oh, maybe I would engage in an argument with someone at a bar on an intellectual issue for the purpose of displaying my intellectual superiority, or at least hypothetically displaying it, you know. So, you know, sometimes people like to argue, and they like to argue because hypothetically they would like to win.
So you don't mean, though, that you were mouthing platitudes?
Oh, sure, I was doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yes, all the time. And sometimes they weren't even platitudes, you know. They might have been things that I picked up in books that weren't cliches, but they weren't mine. I didn't have any right to them. Like, just because you read something doesn't mean you have a right to it. You have to understand it, and understanding something that's deep means a deep transformation. It means you have to live it. And so just because you know a philosophical concept and you can say it doesn't give you the right to utter it as if it's yours. You have to earn that. And I was a smart kid, and so my head was full of ideas that I hadn't earned, and I could lay them out, but that doesn't mean they were mine or me. And so there was a falsity in expressing them. And so I couldn't tell for a while, because I would say things and part of me would be all critical about what I was saying. You don't believe that. That's not accurate. It's kind of a lie. They was saying that to almost everything I said. And I took a risk. I thought, okay, I'm going to assume that the part of me that's critical about what I'm saying is right. Even though that was terrible, because often it meant I could hardly speak. And then I learned to only say things that didn't make me feel weak. And then I decided that that's what I was going to do. So I've been careful with what I've been saying for a long time. I'm
having a hard time with what you're saying right now, because shouldn't the test be, I'm only saying things that are true, not I'm only saying things that don't make me feel weak? What am I misunderstanding in that formulation?
Well, what you're misunderstanding in part is, how do you know the things that you're saying aren't true? And I would say one of the ways you know is that they weaken you. And you can learn that. You can learn to feel that. Carl Rogers talked about this a lot in his work in psychotherapy. He said that one of the primary roles of a psychotherapist was to be congruent. And what he meant by that was that there was no disjunction between what you felt in a situation, let's say, and what you said, that it was all one piece. And that was an embodied unity, not merely a conceptual unity. So I really do think that there's something to it.
So you almost mean psychologically weak, not weak in terms of power.
I mean psychologically weak.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean morally weak.
Okay.
I mean weak in character, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you know, I got very careful with what I said, and at the same time I was spending a tremendous amount of time writing. And so I was very careful with what I wrote. So in Maps of Meaning, I think I rewrote every sentence in that book at least 50 times. And so,
that's crazy.
And every sentence yeah, well,
Sorry,
that's for sure.
Crazy.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. And you know, I'd take the sentence out, and then I'd write a bunch of variants of it, and then I would pick the variant that was best, and then I would try to come up with all the arguments I could about why the sentence was stupid and wrong.
Please don't tell me you still do this.
Yeah, I still do this when I'm writing.
Okay. Did you do that 15 versions of every sentence in 12 Rules for Life also?
I said 50.
Oh, 50. Excuse me.
I was more like...
I meant to be precise in my speech,
it's okay.
But I misheard.
It was more like 15 with 12 Rules for Life. So
Okay.
it was less, but I'm a better writer than I was then, so I didn't have to do it quite as often. So I kept writing it until I couldn't make the sentences any better. That doesn't mean they were good, it just meant that I got to the point where if I was rewriting them, it wasn't obvious that the rewrite was better than the original sentence, so then I had to stop.
So my question a few minutes ago was, how has knowing that you're going to be intentionally, your words are going to be sort of intentionally torqued, how has that changed you?
Well, it's made me even more careful.
Okay.